Say noise.
Commissioner Costello, you're muted.
I think I'm unmuted now.
You're good. You're good.
All right. How you doing, Candy?
I'm doing well. How are you, Colleen?
Good, I'm doing good. Hey, congratulations.
Oh, thanks. You're so kind.
I was going to call you this week and I just, got kind of, but I just, hey, you'll be great.
Well, it is what it is. So
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. But I'm proud of you. That's great.
Well, thanks, Colleen.
And congratulations to Robin, too. I don't know if she's here yet or.
I think she is. It's almost time to get started, so I hope so.
Yeah. But Candy, I ran into a problem last meeting, a family thing that I had to help with. So,
Yeah, because I could have nominated you and you could have done this.
Well, I'll help you in whatever I can do to help.
I know, you're great.
I thought you No, but I told Jana, I says, I'm so sorry that I can't, but I called her like on Tuesday and I says, I just run into a family problem. And so
we all have those, so we understand.
Yeah. Oh, bless your heart. But
Okay.
I great.
Dustin's here. It's 6 o'clock. Alex,
Yes.
have we heard if Robin's attending today?
She is here.
Oh, is she? Okay.
She's on the
Well, it's 6 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting of the Midvale City Planning Commission to order. I've been asked by Midvale City staff to read the following. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by House Bill 5002. Chairman Candy Tippett, as chair of Midvale City Planning and Zoning Commission, hereby makes the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. As restrictions limiting public gatherings occur across the state, Midvale City wants to ensure everyone interested in participating in Planning Commission meetings can do so. Public comments are read into the record by city staff during the public hearings portion of the meeting. If you would like to make a public comment, please send an email to alexmurphy@midvale.com. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words or the equivalent of 3 minutes. Include your first and last name, include your city of residence, include the name of the agenda item so city staff know when you want your public comment to be read into the record. City staff will read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes. Your input is important to us, so please keep your comments concise. Kate, will you please take a roll call?
Yes. Chair Tippett.
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Costello.
Here.
Commissioner Snow.
Here.
Commissioner Smallwood. And I think he's been excused for today. Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
And Commissioner Benson.
Here.
Thank you, Kate. Before we begin with the public hearing portion of the meeting, we have one agenda item that I'd like to proceed with first, and that's the review and approval of the minutes of the January 13, 2021 meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? Any corrections, additions? Okay. Can we entertain a motion then on those minutes, please?
I'd like to entertain the motion to accept the minutes of January what, Candy? Sorry,
January 13th.
January 13th, 2021.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Kate, will you take a roll call, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
I read through them, but I was excused that evening.
okay. Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snell.
Yes.
Okay, those have been approved. So we will now move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. To keep the meeting as orderly as possible, I will ask that everyone in the Zoom meeting mute themselves when not speaking. This makes it easier for everyone to hear and to transcribe the meeting in preparation of the minutes. I'd also ask that the applicants state their name for the record before speaking or answering a question. For this meeting, the process for the item shall proceed as follows. I will introduce the item, followed by a presentation by staff. The attorney's office will provide some information on the Planning Commission's role for the item. The applicant will then be allowed an opportunity to present. I will open the public hearing. The public hearing will be closed after a motion by the commission. The commission will have a time for any additional discussion. I will then ask for commission action. A vote will be taken and I will announce a decision. With that, we will jump right into the action items. Agenda item number 2 is a small scale master plan 21-26-226-004 Swig and Suites at 720 South, 700 West. Amendment to a small scale master plan for Swig and Suites drive-through, Bingham Junction Zone with Riverwalk overlay. Cass Tenney with Savory Swig Stores LLC is the applicant. Jana Ward will present for the staff. Jana, if you're ready, will you go ahead and do that?
So, thank you. Swig is a soda shop, which is, they are proposing a 640 square.
Jana, if I can interrupt for a sec, you're coming across with really loud beeping. I can hardly hear what you're saying.
In the office only. So I really don't know how to change it. I'm gonna put the cover up and see if that, is it changed at all? No.
I can hear you a little bit better, but the ringing is still there.
I'm just gonna try to walk away from here a little.
Isn't it just feedback?
Yeah, but I don't know how to make it go away. Is that any different?
No. Are you hooked up to the computer audio or two different ones?
Just my computer audio.
Hit mute for a sec and see if it goes away. Yeah, it went away.
It went away, but we can't hear her now.
Jana, you're muted still.
Yeah, so it is me, right? It went away.
Where's our IT guy?
I think I'm gonna call in on the phone. So give me just 1 second.
We can see your screen.
thought we had a phone number, but we don't. So I'm going to try to make it quick and talk really loud. I'm sorry. So you can see my screen, correct? It won't stop. Okay. So this is a 640 square foot drive-through soda shop proposed for the southeast corner of the Winco parking lot. Hold on one sec.
Make it stop.
Does that help at all? I turned my speaker down. No? Okay. Matt Pierce is up here, so just give me 1 second. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna have Jana come over here and present off of my computer. So please give her just a moment so she can make the switch.
Thank you, Alex.
And Chair, if I may, maybe it would be, we can save everyone time if I just do my portion of both of these right now. Would that be okay?
Of course. Thank you, Garrett.
So the two agenda items that are going to require actions tonight are the small scale master plan. This is an administrative action that we're reviewing as a conditional use permit. So we're making sure that it meets all the standards of the ordinance. If it does, you have to approve it. If there are things that you feel need to be mitigated, this is your opportunity to address those. And if those issues can be mitigated, you still have to approve it. The other item that's going to come before the Planning Commission tonight is a legislative item. So this is a text amendment for our zoning code regarding master plan developments and single family zones. You're going to be making a recommendation to the city council whether or not to accept the proposed change or not accept the proposed change. And this is also your opportunity to give some feedback to the staff who are proposing it. So as we go through this process, like I said, the first one, the small scale master plan, administrative action, you have to approve it. The other one is a legislative action, and you guys are free to do what you feel is best regarding that recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Garrett. It looks like we might be ready now, Jana.
Yes, I believe I'm ready. Okay. You can see and hear, right? So this is for a 600 square foot drive-through only soda shop in the southwest corner of the Winco parking lot. And this is an amendment to an existing small scale master plan that was approved by the Planning Commission on May 14th, 2008. Construction was completed in October 2009, and the site has remained unchanged since. Sorry, I thought that I changed. There you go. The subject area is located in sub-area 5 of the Bingham Junction zone, which allows restaurant uses with drive-up windows through an administrative conditional use permit. The applicant has submitted the application or that conditional use application, and staff recommends requiring the applicant to obtain this approval prior to the final site plan approval. An amendment to the small scale master plan is required by Chapter 17(3)(6) to be processed as a conditional use permit and comply with all applicable criteria that are all listed in the staff report. General ordinance requirements for the Bingham Junction and Riverwalk overlay zones are shown in Table 1 of your staff report. Most of these requirements have been met. This is the close-up of the site plan. So this on 700 West is the primary entrance on that south end of the Winco parking lot. And you would immediately turn into the parking lot, and they are proposing an entrance into their drive aisle. It'll be a double lane drive aisle, and it'll be a drive up only. Some of you may have been there. They have, they call them Linebusters. They stand out and take your order in the yard. So that helps to move the line a little more quickly. They're meeting the build to line with the building. This is their garbage enclosure. They are changing some of the parking lot and adding landscape islands to accommodate that. Just shows 13 to maybe 17 car queue that before it would actually disrupt any flow. So the parking lot has been modified, and plans show the site still has 44 extra parking stalls. There are shared parking agreements within the Riverwalk Shopping Center that will need to be provided by the applicant as part of the final site plan approval. And staff recommends requiring proof of those parking agreements as a condition of approval. The final landscape plans for the small scale master plan approved for Winco were approved in January 2009. And the landscape changes submitted with this new project combined with those approved plans show 20% of the lot area is landscaped. The requirement for the zone is 13%. However, not all the approved landscaping has been maintained since Winco opened. I did a site review. I walked out there and just looked at what is existing and what some things have died, some things may have never been planted. Just kind of took an inventory out there. So staff recommends requiring the applicant replant the missing landscaping to match the original approval, or submit updated plans showing the overall site meets ordinance requirements as part of the final site plan. They'll be right here, and they have submitted a very detailed landscape plan for what they're going to change. So this requirement is just to say, we're meeting the landscape requirements of the original
small scale master plan, which is this entire 10-acre site. So the submitted elevations show the adaptation of 2 painted shipping containers accented with fiber cement panels and perforated stainless steel panels. Shipping containers have never been reviewed in this area, and staff is recommending the Planning Commission consider if the container metal meets the standards in the ordinance, which I'm going to read for you to think about. Retail storefronts and facades will be designed with integrated architectural features to create visual, interesting frontages, quality and attention to detail, and reflect regional resources and building traditions. Exterior finishes are required to use traditional, time and weather-tested techniques, including architectural precast concrete, architecturally treated concrete masonry units, brick cladding, natural and cast stone, architectural metals, and glazing. We'll come back to this for discussion, but we do need to require an awning above this door. This is the only entrance to the building. It's an employee entrance only. And on the sides, this would be facing the street, and this would be your drive-up window in the drive aisle. If the Planning Commission determines the shipping container exterior satisfies architectural requirements for the zone, then no compatibility concerns are identified. No adverse impacts to the public health, safety, and welfare have been identified. The city engineer reviewed the plan for internal circulation, external access, and utility requirements, and found no adverse impacts expected. The fire marshal reviewed the plan and identified no concerns regarding emergency vehicle access. So we will go ahead, I think, and can discuss that if a shipping container metal will comply with the intent of the material outlined in the ordinance. Or if you have any other questions, I can answer.
Is the applicant present, and does she have anything she'd like to add?
She's here.
Hi, this is Cass Tenney from Savory Management. We represent SWIG. Jana covered everything pretty well. I would say the only thing I'd like to add is as far as the landscaping goes, we've been in contact with Winco already. This is actually the first project that we're doing with Winco as a part of a kind of a master relationship where we'll be putting our SWIG restaurants in a number of their parking lots all across the country. So they are willing to work with us on any landscape that needs to be updated. We'll make sure that the site is in compliance there, whether it's us or Winco replanting or adding the missing landscaping. Jana also briefly mentioned the Linebusters. That is something that we do similar to Chick-fil-A. We recently had a traffic analysis done on another site, and our drive-through times are under 60 seconds at the window. So once the order is placed, there's no backup waiting at the window. And then the drive-through line with an average of 13 cars is about 4.5 minutes. So they move the cars through fairly quickly, and we don't anticipate any traffic disturbance to the rest of the center. We should be able to keep all of the cars in our lane. Also, with that same study, during our peak hours, the average cars at our busiest location is about 13 cars. So that's why we showed 13 on the site plan to accommodate for all of that. Also, as far as the shipping container goes, we have that same building in West Jordan, Spanish Fork, and Tooele, and Mill Creek. And the renderings, I was trying to find a actual picture to share on my screen. I apologize, I didn't have that ready. The renderings kind of don't really do it justice. The wood that's used on the outside is a very nice touch. It kind of, your eye is drawn to that over the metals. And then as far as adding the awning over the back, we just have that one door in the back. There's no walk-up area for customers. This is drive-through only. So we're happy to accommodate any changes there. And that's it.
Candy, you're muted.
Okay, there, I'm not muted. Commissioners, I'd like to open this up for discussion before we open it up for public hearing, just on the shipping container so that we can make a determination there. Is that appropriate, Alex, to do that now?
I don't know. He's not in this room. I don't know if he's on my desk or not.
Is it okay if we do that, Jana?
Open up the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to open the public hearing first.
Do you have to open the public hearing first, or yeah, I'm not sure which.
Or the discussion.
They should do the public hearing first and then discuss that.
Okay. Yep. Public hearing first and then the discussion.
Okay. So we'll go ahead then and open the public comments portion. This is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during this portion of the meeting. You must email your comments to Alex Murphy at amurphy@midvale.com. We will not be taking public comment on the Facebook or YouTube feeds. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which is the equivalent of 3 minutes. Include your first and last name. It is optional to include your city of residence. And please include the name of the agenda item. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. Have we received any comments, Jana?
I have no comments.
With that being said, can't we move to just close the public hearing on that since we have received nothing?
We might want to leave it open just for maybe a minute, just in case anyone's paying attention and wants to make a comment, but I don't think we have to leave it open for too much longer than that. In the meantime, commissioners, do you have any comments?
I really like the look. I think we could have more of those around. I don't have an issue with that.
I like the look. I had one question. Whose responsibility is the landscape if these guys aren't coming in?
Winco, right?
Yeah, Winco would be responsible to update. It's not frequent that we would go looking at landscape years later, but they would be ultimately responsible to replace that landscape, keep it looking good, plant trees, some trees that were never planted. At this point, because they're asking for this amendment, then SWIG is responsible for bringing that site up to the ordinance requirements, which that's what I said. The second option is to just provide an updated site plan. They could remove some of the trees that aren't there and it would probably still comply, but they do need to provide that plan.
I think the only question that I had was on the metal being used, the container metal, and apparently that's been taken care of in the findings.
You will have to make that decision if it's acceptable or not.
Jana, have we received any comments yet?
I'm gonna run to my office and check my email.
Okay.
It's still on.
This is Candace here. Just to put a comment in about the metal, I don't know if you would know that they were shipping containers once all the other materials are applied and such. It sounds like it's going to be powder coated, so we would accept something, a similar material, just on appearance if it were applied to a surface. So I don't see that there's any issue with the appearance.
Well, like I say, as soon as I got into it more, and that the metal is an architectural metal, then, you know, I could kind of see where that would, you know, that would work out.
Okay, Alex and I both checked our emails and there are no comments.
Hey, Robin, you can go ahead.
I move that we close the public hearing on this item.
I second.
Kate, will you take a vote?
I sure can. Commissioner Costello,
Yes?
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing portion is now closed. We've started our discussion, commissioners. Are there any other comments or concerns?
I wanted to say that the metal that you're seeing, the white, is the container. It is exposed. That's the container. It's painted 2 different shades of white.
Right. I think without graffiti or what you'd see on the back of a train, it would be hard to decipher that that was a shipping container. I mean, maybe it would. It's out of context in a Winco parking lot. So I think it will look great. I don't have any qualms.
Well, it is a little bit similar to R&R in the look. The R&R barbecue, isn't it a little bit? I mean, it kind of reminds me of that. I think it'll fit in nicely there. Too bad they didn't do that for Winco.
I'll just say I like it. I think it looks a lot better than some of those little wooden shacks they put up for drinks and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with this.
There's a Starbucks that did this. I believe it's in Sugar House, and it's actually pretty sharp looking.
Mm-hmm. And I've been by the one in Mill Creek, and I like the looks of that, so I think this will fit in well.
With
You're
that,
You're up, Candy. Let's go.
with that, I think we've reached a decision on the metal and that it fits with what the city likes to see. So let's go ahead and review these conditions of approval. Anyone have any questions on any of these?
No, I don't.
No.
Okay, then I think we're in a position to make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move that we adopt the findings and conditions of approval presented in the staff report approving the small scale master plan amended for 7020 South 7th West with conditions.
No, second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Kate, will you please take a vote?
Yes. Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Costello.
Yes.
Okay, that has been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We are excited to have you be in Midvale.
Awesome. Thanks. We're really excited too. And just as an anecdote, Savory also represents R&R. So I'm glad that you saw the correlation between the two. That's our sister company. So we're excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, let's move on to our agenda item number 3. This is a text amendment 20-08, zoning ordinance text amendment. It's a citywide text amendment modifying master plan development standards in single family and single family 1 and single family 2 zones. City staff is the applicant, and Alex Murphy will present for staff. Alex, you're up.
Okay, I have a confession to make on this one. When I sent out the notice, I put the wrong time. So if we could hold this one and postpone it until after 7 o'clock, then my notice would have been accurate and we won't have any issues. But if we hear it beforehand, then there might be some concerns about whether folks actually saw the meeting start on time. So if somebody would do me a solid and switch this item and the next item on the agenda, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we skip over number 3 and have that as the next motion. Or the next.
Yeah, we might want to put that at the end because we only have 2 other items and they don't usually take very long.
Yeah.
So let's just make that agenda 3 item our
3.
last thing.
Okay.
So will you make your motion again, Colleen?
Yes, I make a motion that we hold on to number 3 and have that as our last item for the evening.
I'll second that motion.
Kate, will you take a vote, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
and Commissioner Erickson.
Yes.
Okay, with that, we'll move agenda item 3 to the conclusion of our meeting, and we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is a discussion, residential planned unit development. Alex Murphy is the planning director and will begin the discussion. You're still up, Alex.
I know, I assumed. Thank you, I really appreciate that. I realized after all the notices went out that they all said 7 p.m. on that one, and I didn't want to have anybody get concerned about us moving things around. So this discussion is the product of a series of conversations that we in the planning division have been having with the city council. So you might recall last summer, following a couple of master plan development projects, the city council had some concerns about those standards and how they fit into the neighborhood. The council adopted a moratorium on master plan developments and wanted us to start looking into how we could change those standards to have better outcomes, have better projects happening. So the item that you just pushed to the end of the meeting is going to be a midstream conclusion to that process. And this discussion is hopefully taking that and then turning it into something more. So let me share my screen here real quick and we'll run through kind of what we're thinking. So master plan developments have been allowed in the city for many, many years. It's at least since 99 and possibly going back as far as 1980. I haven't been able to confirm that for certain, but all the evidence I can find indicates that we've had these projects allowed in the city for a long time. They've been known as a couple different names. They're currently master plan developments. They were planned unit developments beforehand. And they've had slightly different standards, but generally speaking, they've been roughly the same kind of project for all that time. After the council asked us to start looking into how we could make changes, we met with them in council meetings and in one-on-one discussions and did a survey with the council to try and get an idea as to what sorts of things were the most problematic about master plan developments. And here's kind of what we came out with. In a survey we sent to all of the council members, they wanted us to basically revise the standards, convert them or consider converting them into a legislative action as opposed to an administrative one, define locations where they're allowed a little bit more precisely, and then add standards regarding tree preservation and increased buffers and floor area ratios. We took those responses, presented kind of our outcomes or our conclusions at that point to them, and then did some one-on-one interviews with the council and they gave us a little bit more detail in those one-on-one discussions. So some of the more specific things they wanted us to address were project size, existing houses. They wanted us to really preserve and incentivize preserving existing houses, incentivize individual ownership of units, reduce the impacts of these projects on their neighborhoods so that we didn't, say, have tall buildings next to short buildings or really high densities next to really low densities, those kinds of things. They wanted us to address parking issues. The old master plan development standards don't have a minimum parking requirement. It just says the planning commission decides what they are. So they wanted us to actually put some numbers in place for that. And then there was also some desire to minimize the use of private roads and try and get roads to be built at a higher standard. So using that discussion, we developed a new purpose and a new type of development here, kind of reverting back a little bit to what we used to call them. But instead of master plan developments, we're considering this new type of development called a residential planned unit development. This making that name change helps us kind of differentiate projects. So we can say this was approved as a master plan development. We know what the standards were for master plan developments when it was approved at some point in the future or in the past. Calling them residential planned unit developments means we know basically the era of planning that they fell in the city's history. So residential planned unit developments, or RPUDs, which is just such a fun word to say, we are intended to do a little bit more than kind of what our master plan developments have done previously. So we want RPUDs to provide a high quality environment that complements existing neighborhoods. We want it to incorporate natural features and provide for more efficient use of land. We want to provide recreational opportunities that function as a focal point for the community, as opposed to just being shoved in the back corner where they're forgotten or ignored. We want to alleviate the impact or perceived impact of higher density developments, and then prioritize pedestrian access within these projects. This is what we came up with to kind of guide our recommendations and our draft and internal discussions. So with that in mind, I've given you kind of the first pass at what these new RPUD standards would look like. So it goes into more detail than the master plan development standards do currently or have previously. So we specifically indicate what uses are permitted and what densities are allowed. We talk about what dimensional requirements, general and design standards, open space requirements, and then ownership and maintenance. And I'm just going to run through real briefly what sorts of things are proposed in here. And then at the end of my little presentation, I wanted to get some feedback from the Planning Commission. We'll talk about that in a minute. Under the permitted uses and maximum density section, we've put in new density standards. So under this draft language, density would scale with project size and with unit mix. So projects that are small in size and provide only one type of unit would have a lower density limit than projects that are larger or provide more units. You can kind of see that here. So 1 to 2 acres ranges from 6 to 10 units an acre, while 5+ is 10 to 14. The lower side tends to be like your single family detached units. And the higher side tends to be your mixed project types. So they'd have to have 2 or more unit types in there, which is consistent with what our housing plan calls for in housing developments, which is providing more variety of housing types. Unit type also scales with project size. So we have density going up as project size increases or unit mix increases. And then also the unit types change as project size increases. So the smallest projects, which would be those 1 to 2 acre ones, can only do single family and 2 family dwellings. So your traditional single family detached or maybe a twin home. Your mid-sized projects would have the option to add townhomes. So you wouldn't see townhomes on the smallest projects, but you could see them on those middling ones. And then the largest projects where you start getting into the multifamily size or type. So townhomes would be basically up to 4 units per building with dividing walls between each unit. Multifamily would be, according to the current definition, anything over 2 that's not a townhome, basically. So if you want to do a 4-plex or a 6-plex or an 8-plex, those all fall into that multifamily and require the largest project size. We also have a list of prohibited uses in RPUDs. So that's making it clear that these are supposed to be residential projects and not some combination of residential and commercial or something like that, at least in the zones that we're discussing. And then also providing a defined density bonus that is it's no longer arbitrary or discretionary. So it says a density bonus is given for providing any of these particular requirements. As it's written right now, it's preserving existing housing, providing affordable housing, and there's actually 2 levels, so that if somebody provides affordable housing at a lower price point, they get more of a density bonus. And then providing individually sellable units. That density bonus is capped so that somebody can't just take a project and continue to increase the density in infinitely as they try and add some of these things in it. With those numbers in place, the densities tend to work out to be somewhere between our existing SF2 zone and duplex overlay zones, so that most projects will probably end up in that kind of 6 units per acre range to 12 units per acre range, which is like right in line with what our existing residential zones are calling for. One thing that I should have mentioned way back in the beginning is that this discussion is really intended to be for the single family zones, although it could also work in the multifamily zones, so the SF and the RN zones. Dimensional requirements just provide some more detail about things like lot size, setbacks, landscape coverage along public streets, building height, and units per building. These are standards that don't currently exist in the master plan development language, and so we're just documenting them here so that it's clear what they are. General requirements is kind of a catch-all that takes things that don't fit anywhere else. So in that density language that I mentioned, mixed unit type projects get the highest density limit. This section defines what that means. What it says is that for a project under 5 acres in size, at least 25% of the units, or at least 25% of the units must be a certain unit type for it to count as mixed. So if you're going to do a project that has single family attached or townhomes and twin homes, then at least 25% of the units need to be one of those types. So you can do 25% and 75%, you can do 50-50, 60-40, anything like that. For projects over 5 acres, the minimum amount drops to 15%. You are required to do 3 unit types if you're at that size and going for that density. And then there is a maximum defined based on unit type. So you can't do like 85% multifamily and 15% townhomes to get the density. You have to do something like 30-30-30 roughly, or something to that effect, so that we get a better mix of units in there. It also discusses ownership at the time of application, which was something that came up on a couple of projects recently where there were concerns that our ordinance didn't better address how multiple owners can apply for a project. And then also defines the review process. And this is the same review process that we have right now, which is a large scale master plan is required for projects over 5 acres. And then for projects between 1 and 5 acres, or for each phase of a large scale master plan, you need to do a small scale master plan. In the design standards, there's a variety of types of design standards in here. So I'll run through them each real briefly. There's a general design standards, which has requirements for orientation towards the open space areas, which I'll talk about in a moment. A maximum number of units of one type along streets and trash collection. These are general layout standards. There are standards for pedestrian connections. So previously we just said provide pedestrian connections and didn't really talk about what that meant. So now we're saying this means sidewalks on all your streets. It means connecting to all your doors. It means connecting all your doors to all your park spaces. And it means connecting your sidewalks to existing sidewalks on adjacent properties or to adjacent uses that generate pedestrian traffic. So you might need to provide a sidewalk to a bus stop or to a shopping center or a park or something like that. And then there's also a requirement to provide street furniture at regular intervals so that there's, say, a bench or a trash can or something that's regularly placed so the residents or users know what to expect. Building design standards is next. This one is, in my mind, probably going to be the most challenging section of this whole discussion. But what we've got in the language right now is that a requirement to orient front facades towards public streets or the park. For those facades that face the park or public street, there's a porch requirement. There's minimum roof pitch, a garage setback, minimum window coverage, offsets in the plane, a limit to the garage door area, and then an exemption for existing units, because again, we want to try and preserve existing units to remain in place, and we don't want to hamstring them by saying they need to meet all of these standards on a building that could be up to 100 years old. This section is probably the hardest right now because the legislature is considering a bill at the moment that would remove our ability to impose any building design standards. So we want to try and address some of the concerns that the public and the council and the planning commission have brought up in these projects through a standard like this, but we also don't want to go so far as to make the legislature or others involved in the development cycle point to us and say we're a bad example of what cities are doing. So some of these probably don't make sense to keep. So we should be really cautious as we talk about what's worth keeping and what's worth tossing, or we should keep that in mind as we consider what's worth keeping and what's worth tossing. Parking is next. We're in this section, we're defining a minimum parking count, which is based on unit and bedroom count. We're also slightly expanding this parking requirement so that it scales based on project size in addition to unit count instead of just unit count. And then for those projects that provide garage parking, we also want to see an overflow as basically a safeguard against people using their garages as storage space and not as parking space. So what these counts work out to mean, most of our projects will end up having a parking standard somewhere between 2 1/3 to 2 1/2 stalls per unit, which is higher than what we've done previously. There is some flexibility in where some of the guest and overflow parking goes. We did write in, for instance, in this language that they could be placed on street as opposed to needing dedicated parking areas. If that's not palatable, we can make changes to that, but we're trying to make sure that we get evenly distributed guest parking as much as possible. We've also added design requirements for parking lots, which aren't in the current language. So stall width and depth minimums, aisle minimums, those types of things. And then there's a whole section on garage design and location. And the intent with that is to put the garages behind the buildings as much as possible. So there is as one of the building design standards that works with the parking design standards, for instance, there's an occupied depth requirement like we have in the form-based code that says the first 20 feet of the building from the front facade needs to be not a garage. If you put a garage on the first floor, it's got to be at the back or on the side. If you detach it, it's got to be set back from the house so that it's not the primary element on the street side. Again, that's another one of those standards the legislature is considering taking away from us. So we want to be cautious about how we move forward with it, but it's worth considering as a design standard at least. And then there also are street design requirements. On the open space side, we've got a minimum total open space requirement of 40%, which is slightly less than the 50% that's in place now, but we feel like it's justified to reduce that requirement slightly because we have increased requirements elsewhere, doing things like adding additional parking requirements, adding additional street width requirements, upping the design standard for the buildings as much as we can, and similar things. We've still got the 15% common space, although now it's been modified, turned into a park requirement that must be centrally located and include a certain number of amenities. So instead of having, say, a gazebo and a playground shoved into the most unusable corner of the lot, now there's got to be a park. The playground could still work, gazebo could still work, but it's got to be somewhat centrally oriented or located so that all the units have relatively equal access to it. The park also, as one of the design requirements, one of the building design requirements does have one of the general design requirements has a frontage standard that says currently at least half of the units in the project have to face the park, so that it ends up forcing the park roughly into the middle of the project so that everybody has relatively equal access to it. And then we've added in here some sections about landscape design standards that includes things like when the landscaping needs to be installed, what sort of coverage it needs to have, so we don't have, say, mulch and no plants in it, a minimum tree count, and a limit on turf outside of the park areas. And then finally, there's an ownership section that says how the common areas can be owned. Currently, we don't really address how common areas are owned or maintained. What we are saying here is that they may be owned by the HOA. Portions of them may be dedicated to the city if Public Works and the council are willing to accept them. Or they may be dedicated to a conservation organization, as long as the future maintenance needs and access is guaranteed. And then the current language also has a restriction on common areas that makes it so they can't be developed in the future. The idea being we don't want somebody to come in, build out a project, and then come back 5 years later and try and add more density to it, unless we want them to add more density to it. So I've put together a handful of examples to kind of show you how this would play out using some properties that we are familiar with and one example that's just kind of generalized. But so here's my first one. This is a project that was approved last year on 7100 South. There were 4 lots, it's a little over an acre. Under the proposed language, their base density would be 7 units if it was single family detached, 9 units if it was 2 family, or 12 if it's a mix. Now, because townhomes and multifamily uses aren't allowed on projects under 2 acres, that means the mix is going to be 2 family or single family, and they've got to have at least 25% of either of those. If they are eligible for the bonuses, the max they could get with the density bonus would be 9 single family, 13 2 family, or 16 mixed. So that 16 mixed, that's the highest, that's the max that they were eligible for under the previous zone, with no real standards on what that means to get that density. So this makes it a little harder. To get that high, they've got to do something like, they've got to have a mix of units. They've got to have probably some preserved units or affordable units to really get up there. They can't just do it by, say, making all the units available for sale. Open space requirement, they're required to have a little under half an acre of open space with a park that's about 7,700 square feet in size. Don't judge my drawing skills because I did these at my desk. And all I have are markers and color pencils. But here's an example that takes this property and basically scrapes it clean and starts from scratch. So it ends up with 12 units in this case, trying to go for that mix. It's got 4 single family and 8 2 family. You can see the single families are up front, so the character of that street is not impacted as much. There are 4 single family houses, or there were 4 single family houses on that property before. As far as anybody on the street's concerned, there are still 4. And then in the back, you get 4 twin homes. There are, in this design, 28 parking spaces in the project, plus all the stuff that they can do on street. So you're at, 2 1/3-ish stalls per unit, higher than what we have now. They've got, with this layout, almost 50% open space, 20% in the park. They've got 8 units that have porches that either front the street or front the park. So you can see them here. And then they've got 35 trees, which is actually quite a lot for that area. This example uses alleyways to provide access. It's got turnaround space. The only thing it hasn't really dealt with is architectural standards, but that's easier to fix once you have the buildings sited. As a second example, here's a layout that preserves 2 of the existing houses. So the 2 houses on the west side are kept. It does kind of the same layout, 4 single family, 8 2 family, but 2 of those 4 single families are preserved units and 2 are new. With this many preserved units, they'd be eligible for 16 total if they could figure out how to make it fit. This layout has 30 parking spaces off street, plus whatever they can fit on the street, 55% open space, 19% in the park, 7 units with porches, and then again, 35 trees or so. You can see the park is centrally located. There would be sidewalks and such throughout the whole thing so that everybody has easy access to it, to the park and to the streets. Same with this one. You can see sidewalks coming out and around to connect to everything. So that's kind of a small example. I tried to figure out if there was a way for me to get 16 units on this site with this standard, and I couldn't really get it to work. You're limited to 2 units in a building with that twin home style. It's really hard to fit more twin homes on there once you factor in things like setbacks, and trying to avoid building your buildings within 5 to 10 feet of each other. So there's probably a way to get 16 here, but it'd be tough. And if they can make it work, then they're probably going to be smaller units, and that's probably better for us anyway, because then we get a better variety of housing. For a second example, here's another property. This is on Park Street over by City Park. It's a little under 3 acres in size. It's kind of deep, narrow and deep. It doesn't have an outlet anywhere, which has been one of the big challenges as folks have looked at it. At this 2+ acre size, but less than 5, their density would be 22 single family, and that's detached or attached, townhomes or no. 27 2 family, or 33 in a mix. If they qualify for the maximum bonus, then that increases to 29, 36, and 44, as you can see here. At 2 acres, they are allowed to do townhomes, but they are not allowed to do multifamily. So they're still capped at 4 units building. They're required to have a little over an acre in open space and a little under half an acre in the park. So here's the first concept. There's a couple errors on this one, and not the obvious one with my drawing, but points to anybody that can point them out. This has 24 townhomes, so they would have to get the density bonus a little bit to qualify for that. It's got almost 3 stalls per unit, plus whatever they can get on street in front of it. They've got to right around that minimum open space, a little over the minimum park size. They've still got at least half of the units oriented towards the park, and everybody else can get there with easy sidewalk access. 16 units with porches, many trees. This layout does require additional property for an exit because we can't have a dead end street that long. In the second example, you'll see trying to work within the bounds of the property that we have and not the property that we want. This has a few more units. It's got a mix of single family and 2 family with 29 total. So they'd have to get a density bonus for it too. It's got 75 parking spaces plus on street. It's a little short on open space. So that doesn't qualify. They'd have to make some changes for that to work. Still got the park, still got many units with porches, still got many trees, but it fits within the area that we're looking at. So something like this is, if you wanted to do something that didn't have the loop to try and get the open space, you'd end up with a project like this that dead ends about halfway down that driveway. And you have a lot of open space in the back. And then for a larger example, we don't have a whole lot of tracts that are over 10 acres in size anymore in the city. Everybody that tries to do a project that size ends up assembling a lot of property. So I just took a 10-acre square. With the density bonuses, it ranges from 100 to 140. This can use multifamily, but multifamily uses the same density as 2 family, so it's still not super high. With the density bonuses, that means maybe up to 200 acres, but that's a pretty good mix of units at that point. I mean, you're talking about at least 3 housing types, relatively evenly distributed between types. Parks, like at least 3.5 acres of park space, or sorry, open space, 1.5 acres of park space. Pretty good layout. So here's a possible example. With this layout, doing only single family and no mix, it's like 73 units. And you might be able to squish a couple more in there if you're willing to go real tight, but you're probably not going to get 100. If you went for like a multifamily layout that used similar footprints, then you could really start pushing the density limit with that, which is fine. That density is still not extremely high. This has got a very large amount of open space, very large park space. This particular layout doesn't have enough units fronting the park, but you could fix that relatively easily by maybe, I don't know, dragging the park over here as putting in a cool intersection and extending it. But it seems like these standards are feasible, at least as far as the layout of the site is concerned. The architectural standards might be a little challenging, and we can talk about those. But my purpose with giving you this information today is that I want to try and get some input before we go back to the council and do kind of the same discussion where we just talk to them about, here's where we're at in this amendment process that they requested. We feel internally, like the planning staff, all feel that this is a good first pass at addressing the concerns that we've heard about master plan developments. And so we are We're supportive of most of it. There are definitely things that could probably be tweaked, but we wanted to get input before we started making too many more changes. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or whatever we can do to foster a discussion about this. I've got my handy notepad here so I can take notes. Let me have it.
You go back to page 10.
Sure. This one?
Yep. I think the minimum roof pitch, just being a builder developer, that would be hard, especially with the new design that people are going for with the lower pitched roofs.
Yeah, that was so. This minimum roof pitch standard actually is a little intentional because one of the big complaints we've been hearing is that allowing somebody to do a 2.5 story building at 8 or 10 or 12 feet from the property line without a steeply pitched roof means that you get just a giant wall right next to what could be a 1-story century-old house. So putting in a minimum roof pitch like this is challenging, and I recognize that. But the idea is that when combined with the 28-foot or whatever building height maximum, this forces that eve line down so that you don't end up with these monstrous walls next to property lines. But again, like I said, that's the reasoning behind it. You don't have to support it. You can tell me to take it out.
Well, just could we word it for maybe anything over 2 story?
Yeah, that could be an option.
The common areas. I'm not a big fan of the city taking over the common areas. That seems like that would cost taxpayers huge dough.
Hold on, I'm writing a note and then I'll respond to that.
Okay.
Okay, yes, I agree that the city taking over common areas is an expense that the city would have to pay for. The way that it's written right now, the developer would have to ask the city to take it. They'd have to provide a maintenance schedule and a cost estimate that Public Works would have to review and tell us whether it's feasible or accurate or not. And then it would have to go to the council and the council would have to accept it. So a developer can't just say, you get my park, you're responsible for it now. But a developer could say, I've built this park and I don't want the HOA necessarily to be responsible for it. So I would like to offer it to the city and then the city can decide if it wants to take it or not. If the city says no, the developer or the HOA are responsible for it. And there isn't a way for them to say, just like foist it on us. But if we get a good park somewhere that we want to have publicly accessible, then this is a good option to pursue that allows both sides to win, basically.
In the density bonus, how do people feel about if we have driveways rather than just the garage? Adding that to if they give us driveways for people to park in, then we give a little bit of a bonus.
I like the idea of having driveways for parking.
Yeah, I think this no driveway stuff is going to bite us probably sooner than later.
So are you meaning like incentivize driveways with a density bonus or require driveways no matter what?
I would love to see required, but I understand that doesn't work on every unit. Maybe incentivize would be a give and take.
Okay, that's definitely an option. I'd have to think about what that means for there would be cascading impacts if we did something like that, but I can come up with something that proposes that.
Maybe could we, if they gave driveways, we could do a percentage towards their green space or something. I don't know, I'm thinking out loud, but
yeah. I mean, we have increased parking requirements already with this and decreased open space requirements. We've kind of done that. It's a little more stick and a little less carrot, but We can try and go above. The way that I could see that maybe working, if I'm just spitballing, is providing a density bonus if parking is above a certain ratio. So like we require somewhere around 2.25 to 2.5 roughly. And if you did like 3 or 3.5 per unit, then you could get a density bonus. And then people start considering, well, how do I put more parking in here to get more units? And if we did that, we could say like it's limited to parking in driveways or something like that.
You know, can I make a comment to that? This is Colleen. I can remember when we had the area on 7800 South and State, that whole area in there where there's townhomes in there now. And I know when it was first under discussion, they were just going to have like one garage per unit. And they found that they were not going to be selling as much as if they had 2 garages per unit. And that would be my only thing with just having the driveway as opposed to a garage.
Well, I think what Dustin's saying is he just wants to allow the driveway to also be considered as parking spaces, correct?
Yeah,
Dustin? Yeah, so garage in addition to driveway, correct?
Oh, in addition to it?
Yeah.
Well, like a 20-foot driveway and then your garage starts.
So you have a garage, but you can still park in the driveway.
Good. I thought you were eliminating the garages.
No. So if you want to back your car out of the garage to wash your car, you have a driveway to park.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry, Des. I misunderstood. I thought you were eliminating the garages and just having driveways.
Nope. I'm for garages.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This is Candy. I do like the increase in parking requirements. I think that's where we always get bogged down, is because of parking issues. That's always a big complaint with residents, and it's going to go a long way to, I think, increase that. It's going to make people feel a lot better. The landscaping requirement, where in the heck are you going to put 50 trees or 35 trees? I mean, I get that we want to have it look really nice, but that seems a little excessive to me.
So the way that that's laid out right now, in the proposed language, that is, not the current ordinance, it would be street trees, and then there's a per square foot calculation for open space. So it'd be, if you have more open space, you're required to have more trees. If you have less open space, you have
Okay,
less
so that the trees aren't going to take over the open space. I mean, it seems to me like you're kind of.
I mean, if you think the calculation now is like 1 per 1,000 square feet, I believe. If you think that's too high, that's basically like 1 tree covering the space of 5 parking stalls. If you think that's too high, then we can revise it down. More trees make things better for people to use the space.
Well, and I agree with that. My concern though is as those trees grow.
Yeah.
You know, and then they tend to take over. So I think that's something we need to look at too.
Okay.
I've actually seen Alex's list of acceptable trees.
Say that again.
You've got a pretty good handle on acceptable trees. I think that could come into effect as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys feel okay about that, I was just looking at your drawings and going, where in the heck are you going to put 35 trees?
Yeah, I mean, the scale's a little off. So
yeah.
For instance, if you do 35 trees, you'll definitely have, I think it was like 7 along the front.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other ones will basically be scattered kind of around. The smaller open space areas get a little bit tighter. I mean, this is like a 15-foot space between building and fence line. So I can understand that tight areas, maybe that's not a great approach, but the tree type is not defined. So you could do a mix of columnar and shade and evergreen and other things in there to make that work. So the idea was that we want, what we've been seeing with a lot of projects recently is open space areas that end up being turf or mulch. And
Oh, yeah.
not much else. So we want to set a standard that actually makes it so there's landscaping in there. So we've got coverage, which is just a base, like a ground level coverage, and then the tree requirement on top of it so that people can't just come in and say, well, I put in 6 trees and that's all you told me I had to do, and I'm not doing a tree more. and it just doesn't cover the
Yeah,
space.
I get
But,
that.
like I said, if that number seems too high, then we can totally pull it down, or we can change how it's calculated or anything like that if there's a way that makes more sense.
And I'd like to chime in again, Colleen speaking. I was looking at the way you were talking about how putting like the playground or the common area, you know, for the different projects kind of in the middle rather than off in some corner. And I really like that idea because I think the accessibility that people would have, they'd be more apt to come into a common area if it were more centrally than, you know, hauling off to some corner.
Mm-hmm. That's what we were thinking. You can go through most of our recent master plan developments, and if you look at where it's usually a playground and a bench or a playground and a gazebo, that's kind of what we get. They all tend to be like shoved in the back corner in a spot that is really hard to access or not really easily accessible or viewable by any of the units. Yeah. So pulling it into the middle means that people basically, if they walk out their front door, they're going to be close or in the park space.
Mm-hmm. So I really like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Candace. So overall, I feel like there was a big swing, which is understandable. I think before, when we were using the language of, it was very descriptive, so not prescriptive. And I feel like this is a swing towards prescriptive.
Yes.
A lot of your designs show that, where this would be an ideal situation with a porch here and a park here, and this is how we would want to organize. I think the best solution is somewhere in between. I think even if we made this law now, which we're not, but even if we made this proposal law, there would still be a misunderstanding, I feel, with the public when you hear multifamily housing, townhomes, or the like, when it comes to they're coming into my neighborhood and it's going to ruin everything. So I think there needs to be some sort of education aspect to this, because I don't think it's necessarily what's in our codes or our large scale plans. I don't think that's necessarily the issue at hand. You mentioned a lot of when you pencil everything out, it meets the requirements that we have now. So I think a lot of it could be fixed with education, along with tempering the descriptive that we had before. Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you're saying. So the reason it's as prescriptive as it is because we have to have arbitrary standards in zoning ordinances. So historically, we could say, we want this to be compatible with the neighborhood and leave it at that. And then the planning commission or the city council would look at a project and go, yeah, that's compatible, or no, that's not. And they'd make their decision based on that. And the decision could vary based on, who's voting in that meeting, not even based on the people on the board, but,
sure,
Jim wasn't here today, so Jane got to vote and she didn't like it, so it got denied. So we can't do that anymore. We have to have things that are prescriptive. And so this,
sure. I just feel like it's a big swing.
Yeah, and it is.
And the ultimate goal is the same, essentially. I mean, like you said, a lot of the besides parking, but a lot of the other things, like you couldn't fit that many units. The property can only fit so many units on it, sort of situation. So, I mean, it all kind of pencils out the same. It's just going about it a different way.
Yeah, and this is this big swing is intended to try and address those compatibility concerns specifically. So, I mean, Garrett and I have had many conversations about what it means for something to be compatible and how we are supposed to approach it, given the case law and legislative actions that have happened over the last generation or so. So when we compare old language that was adopted at what was, quite frankly, a totally different time to what we have now, it's going to feel like a big difference. And we kind of have to deal with that because we've got an ordinance that's old. We've got an ordinance that needs some desperate attention. And this is one of those spaces. So I think
I guess it's more
is,
a comment on picking and choosing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is what I'm saying. Picking and choosing exactly what's so important to take more prescriptive versus the other.
Yeah. So are there things in here that you think are a step too far?
While I would love every new building ever created to have ample porch space, I don't think that's necessarily something that's feasible, even if it is a beautiful park that it's abutting against. I think that's a step too far, even though I would love it. I think it's that sort of language that gets a little bit heavy-handed.
I can appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I will point out also, by the way, none of these standards preclude somebody from trying to do a traditional subdivision and build basically kind of your standard strip subdivision. This is just one particular type of development that will be subject to these standards. It's not like everybody in the entire city has to have a porch. So,
although it would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's a little bit much.
So, I mean, we could take that out. I think so. As I was going through this process, some of the things I noticed that might be a little more problematic relate to the garage design, as Commissioner Snow brought up. So when we talk about garages, I'm going to switch screens here really quick. So here's the actual language that you guys have. So we have in here a requirement that all garages must be at least 20 feet behind the front facade. This means, in effect, that nobody gets a driveway in their front yard. All the garages are in the back. We have, where'd it go? When a garage faces a street, there's a limit on the area that the garage can cover. That might be a bit hard, especially for townhome units. And then in the parking standards, there's specific design requirements for garages. So like in a detached or a single family or two family unit, the garage has to be either on the side of the building, set back behind the building, or on the back. And the intent there is that the front of the building is a pedestrian space. The back of the building is a vehicular space. This is one of the things we heard from at least one of the council members, is that they wanted the front of the building to be more inviting because that's where people sit on their porch and say hi to their neighbors as they walk past, kind of thing. This is admittedly a very hard standard to meet. And in fact, as I was going through some of my example concepts, it kept getting in the way as I was trying to figure out how to fit the most number of units on a space. So there's a balance to be struck here between, do we want to mandate designs that are pedestrian friendly or vehicle friendly? The best case scenario is probably a balance, but anything that's not 95% vehicle and 5% pedestrian is going to feel like a dramatic shift because of how much priority we've given vehicles over the last 60 years. So that's an example of something that maybe is worth discussing. And we don't have to talk about it today. I expect this will take a couple meetings to kind of work through. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Okay.
I think being a builder, the garage setback is really hard to make work. I would say 80 to 90% of the time.
Yeah, I kind of figured that'd be the case.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree. I think that, if there's several townhomes and twin homes that we've approved where the garages aren't set back.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be very difficult to accommodate that standard in any of those kind of designs. So I'm a little concerned about that one too.
It really does mandate lot width or the width of an individual unit.
That's already in place. People already designed the lot based on how wide the garage is. So a standard townhouse that we see right now is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 45 feet deep and 20 to 30 feet wide. What this would do in effect is say the minimum size for a townhouse would have to be 22 feet wide by 40 feet deep. You basically can't do smaller than that.
Right.
So it's a little bigger than what we see right now, but not a ton. Where we only allow 2.5 stories in the single family zones, it also means that first level doesn't just get totally occupied by parking. But again, I'm explaining the design or the construction decisions, not necessarily saying that it has to stay this way. All right, we'll switch back. But yeah, that's definitely, I've got it noted down here that we should reconsider that garage and driveway configuration. How do you guys feel about the density scaling and unit scaling as a topic?
As a citizen, I think it's good. As a developer, it's probably not so good.
And are you saying that because it impacts your bottom line too much?
It would, yeah. But I agree that we need to change.
So the concept here is the council was pretty firm universally about wanting to increase the minimum lot size for these types of projects. But we also have a lot of lots that are strangely configured, don't necessarily lend themselves well to any other type of development aside from this type of planned unit development. So my thought here with the way that this is put together is ratcheting down the density on the smallest projects means that they can still happen, and we can still use awkwardly shaped or sized lots, but builders and developers are really incentivized to try and assemble property or find larger pieces if they want to maximize the dollars or units that come out of it. So we wouldn't see somebody coming into a 1 acre or 2 acre parcel and putting in what feels like a gigantic project necessarily. The numbers maybe, I mean, like I said before, the numbers are roughly in line with what we've got in the existing single family and RM12 zones. So it's not a huge departure. But it is a pretty significant downgrade for the smallest projects.
If you were at just under an acre, but you gave the city all the bonuses imaginable, could they use that to get to the 6 to 10 units?
The under an acre wouldn't qualify for this kind of project. So no matter what happens under an acre, it wouldn't work. Okay. Now we could maybe look at opening that up. So if we went that route, we could drop the low side and say it has to be half an acre and keep the densities kind of where they're at. If you did it all single family, then you'd be at 6. If you did it a mix, you'd be at 10. So, I mean, at a half an acre, that'd get you somewhere between 3 and 5 units, or maybe 4 to 6 if you're getting density bonuses. That does allow for maybe a little more efficient use of that property. I just didn't think we were at a point where that was palatable yet.
What if, I wouldn't want to lower it, but what if anything under an acre, we gave lot size? I know we've started to see some 6,000 square foot lots.
We actually have a 5,000 square foot lot zone. So there's always the option to rezone for that. But I don't know that this particular development type, these planned unit developments, make a whole lot of sense at that scale. I mean, you're also talking at that point about a homeowners association that has 3 people in it. And that may not be best for the long-term viability of that project. That's some issues that I saw in Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County actually upped their minimum size for this kind of project to 3 acres because they felt like anything under 3 acres really struggled with keeping an HOA around and maintaining the common areas. I haven't seen that issue as much here in Midvale. We've got a lot of projects in that 1 to 3 acre size, and it doesn't seem like they're really struggling. The biggest issues they seem to have are parking, so increasing parking helps with that.
I'm on board. I like a lot of this.
I like the mixed unit types. Setting a percentage for that. I like that.
Glad to hear it.
I can't just be grumpy all the time.
I kind of thought that this would probably get like 60 to 70% support and that the remaining bits would vary based on the person. So I'm glad to hear that you like parts of it.
Yeah. I've been through it once and I think it's good. But there's some things that maybe in a workshop we could discuss.
My plan right now is I'm going to basically take the same presentation to the council and say exactly what I've told you guys tonight, get the same kind of feedback from them, and then come back in, revise it again. And then I haven't decided at this point if it's after that state, if it'll be ready for a public hearing or if we want to workshop it. But it sounds like workshop will probably be better. So I'll probably council discussion and then come back and do a workshop with the Planning Commission.
I'd like that.
And then we can spend some more time on it and then consider that adoption process. I'm trying to get this out of, what I'm trying to do right now is get the administrative barriers out of the way that we've got for master plan developments at the moment. Because right now we're not taking any applications for master plan developments in the single family zones while we're waiting for the next item that we'll discuss to resolve. And then this will be a longer process to try and make sure that everybody's satisfied with the route that we're going and the outcomes that we're reaching. Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right. That was all I wanted to talk about here. I really appreciate everybody's input, and like I said, we'll bring it back later. In the meantime, if you want to do some one-on-one discussions about what this would mean, I'd be happy to set those up. We can meet here in the office or in a larger room, or we can talk via video conference or phone call, whichever works best for you guys. Just feel free to reach out to me individually and let me know if you want to have that kind of discussion. My calendar is pretty open at the moment. And I'll give it back to the chair. All yours.
Thanks, Alex. I think we had a good starting discussion, and I look forward to discussing this further. Let's go to agenda item 5, which is staff update, and then we can move back to our agenda item 3 that we left open. Okay. So Alex, what do you have to report to us?
So I don't have a whole lot tonight, but I did want to let you know we are going to have a second meeting in February. We've got 3 items on that agenda right now with a 4th pending. So plan on the 24th as another planning commission meeting. And then our IT department has asked me to find out if anybody feels like they need a new iPad. So if you feel like you need a new iPad, please let me know. You can send me an email or give me a call, and I'll make sure we can get that set up for you. If you're having issues logging into your iPad, like maybe with an update or something like that, please also let me know and we can make sure to get that resolved. It'll probably mean you'll need to come into the office and work with our IT folks directly, but I can help you get that set up. Otherwise, things are just cooking along. We've got a lot of projects happening at the moment. March is also looking like we're going to have 2 meetings at this point with some fun ones coming in, and everything's just going gangbusters. Are there any projects or questions or concerns that you guys want me to look into or answer for you in the meantime?
I just wanted to mention one thing. I don't know if anyone else has heard any feedback on this or not, but you know, the situation in Salt Lake City where the individual homeowner brought in homeless tents.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard anything back on that? Because I've had a couple of people call me on that and say, we don't do anything like that in Midvale, do we? And I says, no.
Nope, we don't have anything that like that that's allowed. In fact, from the reporting that I've seen, he's in the middle of a enforcement battle with Salt Lake City over it.
Yeah.
So
well,
we would basically respond the same way here. If somebody tried to set up a campground of any kind, doesn't matter who's visiting it.
Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because I've had a couple of calls about that. Do we have any problems like that? And I says, no.
Are we sure we don't? Have you seen the one on 9th East that got rejected? Across from the storage?
So that property, let's see.
Is it a homeless encampment there?
It's not a homeless encampment, but it does have some enforcement activity happening on it. So our code enforcement officer has been working with several other officers at UPD to address issues on that site.
Aren't there like 15 cars there right now?
There's something like that. I haven't been out there myself.
Oh yeah. I live right by there and it is a mess.
Yep,
so
we're working on it.
I wouldn't be surprised about that. That's really bad right there.
Yeah, that's a separate issue that we're trying to resolve.
Good. By the way, I won't be here on the 24th. I'm heading out to Florida.
Okay. I'll make sure Kate notes that down.
Stay safe in Florida.
What?
Stay safe in Florida.
I'm not real worried about it.
Okay.
I live on the edge.
Well, then I think with that, we'll go ahead and move back to our agenda item 3. I will introduce it again. It's a text amendment 20-08. It's a zoning ordinance text amendment. It's citywide text amendment modifying master plan development standards in single family 1 and single family 2 zones. City staff is the applicant. Alex Murphy, it will present on behalf of the staff.
Okay. I don't have a fancy presentation for you on this one, so I'll just explain what we're doing here. So this is our proposal to address the immediate concerns surrounding master plan developments. I mentioned in our earlier discussion, the council had some concerns and the public and the planning commission have previously expressed concerns about certain types of master plan development projects in the single family zones in particular. So what this text amendment proposes to do is repeal the language that would allow a multifamily unit type to be built in a master plan development in the single family 1 and 2 zones. This would mean no more townhomes, basically nothing over a twin home in those projects until that language is amended at some future date. So instead of seeing, say, like the townhome project on 7100 South, somebody trying to do a project on that type of thing would be capped at 2 units per building. And they'd still have all the other standards in place as they currently are. So open space and parking and architecture and all those remain as is. This just removes that option for the multifamily development. We see this as I don't want to say a short-term solution, but it's an immediate solution to a problem that we're trying to address with a longer-term effort through that Rpub discussion that we had earlier. So we recommend that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the council to adopt this change, recognizing that it'll probably be a relatively short-term solution or short-term decision. It'll be changed later, but this gets us at least through this moratorium period that we're operating under at the moment. Any questions?
I'd say do it. I like it.
I'll also point out that moratorium that the council adopted in July of last year was a temporary version of this ordinance. This would just make it permanent. So while we work on the other changes that we've discussed.
So we've already heard from Garrett. So we'll go ahead and open a public comment on this. This is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If you would like to comment on a public hearing item, you will be allotted time during this portion of the meeting. Please email your comments to Alex Murphy at amurphy@midvale.com. We will not be taking public comment on the Facebook or YouTube feeds. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which is the equivalent of 3 minutes. Include your first and last name, including your city of residence is optional, but please include the name of the agenda item. City staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes, so please be concise with your statements. The public comment portion is now open. Have we received any comments?
I have not, no.
This is Dustin. I move we close public comment.
Can we get a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we close the public comment portion. Can we please have a roll call vote, Kate?
Yes. Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Costello. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Nope, not a problem. Commissioner Erickson
Yes.
and Commissioner Snow.
Yes.
Okay, the public comment portion is now closed. Are we ready to make a recommendation?
Okay, I'll make a recommendation. I move that we forward a recommendation to the city council to adopt the proposed text amendment to the single-family residential SF-1 and SF-2 zones.
Snow, second.
It's been moved and seconded. Go ahead and forward that recommendation to the city council.
We'll need a vote.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Kate, will you please take a vote?
I sure will. Commissioner Costello,
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Snow,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Anderson.
Yes.
With that, we'll make a recommendation to the city council.
Great, thank you, everybody.
I think that concludes our meeting. With no other agenda items on the agenda, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:42.
All in favor?
You're just asking if anyone's opposed. Really?
Oh, is anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Night.